The first thing that I told you I would show you today before we get into our lecture is commenting. A lot of you already did comments and you panicked because they didn't show up right away. That's a spam catching feature. So I have to manually go in and approve you because you're all new users. Well, if you were a user from before, then you didn't have any issues making your comments. But if you've never made a comment on the website, I have to manually go in and approve you to make comments so that you don't spam me to death. So I will go through and do that, so don't panic. It'll show up after today. It will show up immediately once you make your comment. So just bear with me. When it comes to commenting, for those of you that haven't done comments, I told you the first day I would walk you through doing comments, and then from then on, when you sit down waiting for me to start lecture, dealing with technical problems and whatever, that's when you write your comments. You'll stay caught up. Won't be a big deal. When it comes to doing comments, I ask for 3 comments on each exercise and 3 comments on each assignment. We've only had 1 exercise, so I would go into the student work section. I would go to exercises, and then I would choose exercise 101 here. And then I would scroll through the exercise 101 and pick something that I thought was interesting. So let's say I picked something like this, and I thought that was interesting. I'd take a quick gander at what was said about it, and then I'd come down into the comment section. Now, number 1, I'm already logged in. That's important. We don't want you making comments not logged in. So make sure you're logged in. That's how I keep track of them. Number 2, when you come down here, you'll see that it says submit a comment, minimum of 25 characters. It will also show who you are and who you're commenting as. So that's good. That's just a way of referencing it. So the minimum of 25 characters is just don't make, cool. That's not a good comment, right? We don't want to do that. So we want constructive comments. So that's why there's a character minimum. Furthermore, I told you guys last class, I think I told you last class, there's a time on the comments. So if you're just ripping through comments, trying to type really fast, or you copy and pasting the same comments, it'll say, wait a minute, you got to slow down. So this is designed to make you think, to make you actually say something, etc. So in this case, I might comment something about, the concrete shell of this building. So I might say, or whatever, something interesting. Okay? So I write my little comment, and then I come down here and I go ahead and post comment. There are 2 check boxes down below here. This is if you want to be part of a conversation and you want to hear what somebody else has to say about the same thing, you could check the box. Otherwise, you won't be part of it. You won't get notified. That's okay. You don't have to be notified. We're going to talk about email today. You get too much email as it is. So I'm not expecting it to happen. You should get a notification if somebody comments on your work, however. And that's important because you want the feedback. So that's built in. But unless you want to be part of this whole cycle of commenting and commenting back and whatever, you don't have to check those boxes. So once it's submitted there and once you're approved, your comment will immediately show up right there. All right? So that's kind of how it's set up to work. I'm asking that you do 1 comment today instead of 3. You just need to do 1 since it's practice and whatever. Those of you that did 3, it's awesome. You're ahead of the game. You've got a few extra comments to spare. Remember that the comments work as a cumulative total over the course of the semester. At the end of the semester, you're going to have somewhere around 80. Don't quote me on the exact number, but it's in that ballpark. So if you do an extra couple now, you can do a few less later. So it's just cumulative. I'm not going to go in and say, did you do 3 on exercise 101? And I mean, the logistical challenges of me having to grade that are impossible. So it's not going to happen that way. So that's how you go through, and that's how you do your comments on the course website. So I wanted to make sure that I showed you that before we got started today. This is lecture 102, Technology, Design, and Architecture. And essentially, this is my lecture about all the things that are often not covered in a computer class. It's the overarching background infrastructure that you need to succeed in a computer class, certainly in a college level computer class. And so this lecture can be a little bit long-winded, and that's part of the nature of it. I will make sure that the lab today is a little bit shorter than it was last class. Well, actually, it might not be possible for it to be shorter than it was last class, but it's a little bit shorter than normal to compensate for the fact that this lecture tends to go a little bit longer than normal. The other thing I want to point out is today is definitely not about Photos and Photoshop just yet. That'll be coming in the next lecture, 103, and then going forward in 104 and 105, etc. Today is not about those photos, but next lecture you're going to want to make sure that you have your camera available. That could be your phone. It also could be an actual camera, a digital SLR, etc. And we're going to get you out to take real pictures. Hopefully the smoke will be a little bit better, and you'll be able to go outside and have a good photo shooting session. But for now, we're going to talk about the backbone of the computer world, talk about naming files, backing up your work, etc. So let's talk first about organizing your digital life and the different ways that you might organize your computer files. So the first system for organization, and some people believe wholeheartedly in this system, I'm not one of them, but that is that you have a very flat file system. Essentially, you have some broad category folders. Generally, either if you're working on Windows or if you're working in the Mac operating system, you have a folder called Documents. Generally, that's the case. In your Documents folder, you have several subfolders in this scenario. These subfolders are broad topics, and maybe they're Illustrator, InDesign, Photoshop, Word, whatever. And you put all the files that are related to that in that one folder. So this is great because if you're working on a Word file, you know, oh, I just need to look in the Word folder. It must be there somewhere. The bad part about this is it's difficult to keep your projects separate. So if you have work projects and you have school projects, how do you know which one's which? That's complicated. The other thing is that your folders tend to get really large. It's easy to have 100 or more files in a folder. The same thing happens if you keep everything on your desktop. My mother-in-law, I'm going to throw a few people under the bus today, and the good news is my mother-in-law doesn't listen to these recordings, so I'm safe, I think. My mother-in-law is a classic example of this. She stores every single file on her computer on her desktop. You cannot see the background in her desktop because there are so many files on that desktop. But that's how she works, and somehow she knows where the stuff is. I look at her computer, she asks me to fix something, and it's like, I can't even do this. So some people work that way. My dad keeps everything in the Documents folder, but it's the same kind of thing. It's just, it must be somewhere. It's in the Documents folder. I don't know. But you can be a little bit more organized if you want to. And I think it would help you a little bit. So let's throw out a hierarchical example of where you might organize your files with a little bit more of a hierarchy. So in this scenario, we start with the same Documents folder because that's the generic place that you tend to store stuff. Inside of that, maybe you separate it out into some other broad categories. Maybe you have a school folder. Maybe you have a work folder. Maybe you have a personal folder. Maybe you have second job folder. I don't know. You separate it into some big categories. Then within one of those categories, so let's pick on the school folder, for example, maybe you make a folder for each class that you're in. You're in 135. Maybe you're in 136 with me. You have a separate folder for 135. You have a separate folder for 136. You have a separate folder for 121 and whatever other class you're in. Inside of that folder, maybe you have further subfolders. Maybe you have folders, let's pick just 135, for example. Maybe you have folders for your assignments. Maybe you have folders for your exercises. Inside of your exercises folder, maybe you have a subfolder for exercise 101, subfolder for exercise 102. You get where I'm going with this, right? So you organize by these folders, and it helps you stay organized. So there are some distinct advantages to this. It's organized, it's project-based. So if you know you need to go find your stuff for exercise 102, there it is. It's right there. You know where it is because it's organized for you. It makes finding things really easy, especially long after the fact. So you finish 135, you finish 136. Maybe you move on. You go to school at Berkeley for a while. And you go back and you say, I did that really cool Mondrian Museum in 121. I'd really like to go back and see that. Or I need it for my portfolio. Or something like that. Where do you go find it? Well, if you kept things organized, you just go back and find that 121 folder, and inside of that would be the Mondrian folder, and inside of that would be all your stuff. So it's really good when time passes to have this organization behind you, because then you can always go back and find your files. It's easy to keep the project separate. We talked about it. The other great thing is if you really need to find a Word document, but you can't remember where it is, you can always do a smart search and just look for Word documents and basically create a temporary folder that has all your Word documents in it. So computers are powerful enough to do that. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. So I'm up here and I'm talking about this is how you should organize things. It doesn't mean that this is the only way to organize things. It doesn't mean it's the right way to organize things. All I'm trying to do is spark you to think, maybe I should think about how I organize my files. That's what I'm asking you to do. So don't necessarily copy it exactly. Think about, what could I do? Could I be a little bit more organized? Could I be a little bit more organized on my flash drive, for example? So on your flash drive, we're going to have the root of the flash drive. Then you're going to have a folder, and we're going to talk about this today as part of the backup section. You're going to have a folder for your OneDrive. I looked it up. I think you guys all get 25 gigs for free with your student account. So that's what we're going to use. It gives you 25 gigs. That's pretty decent. It's more than you get with a lot of the other free options. I like to keep things in the free category. So you guys are all students. Free is good. So we're going to have a folder for OneDrive. And inside of that OneDrive folder, which will be the folder that's backed up on your flash drive or your hard drive, that's where you might put your various classes that you're working on. You're in an AutoCAD class. You're in this class. You make folders for those, and then inside of those folders go all of your files. Naming your files, another thing that's important. If you leave all of your files Untitled 1, Untitled 2, Untitled 3, it's really hard to know which one was your English paper. So the system that I'm going to show you here was something that I did in grad school. Like I said before, this is not mandatory. It's not something where you have to, oh, this is the only way to do it. I'm not standing up here saying, I'm God, this is how you do it. I'm up here saying, hey, this is an idea. And if it doesn't work for you, change it and make it work for you. But instead of just naming things at random, think about how you might be able to help yourself later on. So the way that I did it is I set it up with a prefix. And I put this before every file that belonged to a particular class. And I did this in grad school to keep myself organized. And so if it was an architecture class, I put an A. Then I put the course number. So if in the case of this example, it was 121. So A121 is probably enough. Certainly here at DVC it would be enough, unless you ended up taking classes more than once. In grad school, I needed another way to define it because you take a 201 studio 3 times. So it's an architecture 201, and you take it 3 times. So I needed some way to differentiate between each of those 201 studios. So I put the first initial of the last name of the professor. I don't know. It worked for me. I could have numbered it. I could have done a bunch of other things. But I did that. And so it worked. So I always put A121A. Or in my case, in grad school, it was A201U, A201J, A201W. Those are the 3 ones that I used. So that's a prefix, and that tells me where it belongs. So now, here I am, 15 years after grad school. If I needed to go back and find the work that I did in the comprehensive studio at Berkeley in 2006, I could go back and look for A201U, and all the files would show up, no matter where I stored them. So I'm keeping things organized for long-term benefit. Now we talk about the end. So I talked about the beginning of the file name. What about at the end? You guys do this a lot anyway. You're working on your English paper, you do a save as, and you say, instead of 01, it's now 02, or 3, or 4, or whatever. So I did that, but I took it a little bit of a step further. So I have 2 different differentiations here. I have major addition shifts, and then I have subversions. And this makes more sense if we talk about, say, doing a rendering. Let's say we're in Rhino and we're doing a rendering and we're trying to get it right. So I set up my view, I get my render, it's render 02, and I do the render, and I look at it. It's okay. I'll save it as 02A. Then I tweak some settings, and I change some materials. I maybe change a little texture mapping. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Same rendering, looks the same. It's now 02B. A little bit more tweak, 02C. A little bit more tweaking, 02D. It's the same thing over and over, small, subtle changes. And I work my way through. Then I say, this design sucked. I need to move on. I need to change some stuff. I change the angle. I change something big. It becomes 03, and I start the process over again. So it's just a way of making differentiation between big changes and small changes. Does that mean it's necessary? No, it might not be. Maybe you only do the numbering. But it's nice to have some way of showing additions. And part of this is because when you're in studio and you sit down with your studio professor and they say, you really need to change directions, you need to go over here and you need to do that. Well, you don't want to trash everything that you did before, because the next day you might show up and they say, you know what, that other one was better. Let's go back to that one. You guys have had this happen probably, right? So you don't trash it. You just, new number, keep working, go back to the old number, keep working. Okay, so it's just a way of keeping things a little bit organized. Now what happens in the middle? I don't care. You can put whatever you want there. So in this case, I call it file descriptor. So it's A121A is the first bit, the 02B is the last bit, and everything in the middle doesn't really matter. A couple things to keep track of. So if you put spaces in file names, it's totally fine if you're on your operating system. If you're just working on your computer, it's fine. As soon as you upload it to the web doesn't like spaces. So it's going to throw things into your spaces. It's going to throw dashes in. It's going to throw weird random characters in. It depends on how the website is handling it. And you guys have done this when you've downloaded a PDF from your bank or whatever. They put random characters in there. It happens. It's just not clean. So if you want control over what your file name looks like, if you're going to be uploading it and downloading it, putting dashes in, putting underscores in instead of spaces can be a nice thing. It's just a little cleaner. Is it necessary? No. Websites can handle it. Operating systems can handle it. If you're syncing, let's say in OneDrive, back and forth, you can have spaces and it doesn't make any difference. It's designed to handle that. The other thing is to stay away from slashes, question marks, or periods in your file name. Those have special meaning when it comes to computer code. So computers are looking for something specific when it looks for a slash or a question mark or a period. So if you stay away from those characters, you're better off in your file names. And you guys might have had this happen where you have something, you have a file name and you have a period in it, and the operating system gets confused and it tries to open it in the wrong program because it doesn't know where the extension is. Generally speaking, the period comes at the end of the file name before whatever the extension is that tells the computer how to open that file or what program to open it in. So if you have multiple periods, they can get a little confused sometimes. Backing up your files. So how many people keep an active backup of your files right now? Okay, so if I were to come, if I walked over to you and I said, I take everything you have electronic in your bag right now, would you lose stuff? Yeah, probably. So my goal right now is to train you guys not to lose anything. Okay, if somebody walked up here and took my laptop, took my iPad, took my phone, I wouldn't lose a thing. Because I have everything backed up. It's currently backed up right now. So can you do the same thing? You absolutely can. So this is a method of backup that a multimedia guild of artists called the Pixel Corps adopted as their way of thinking about backing up their files. And I think it's a really good way of making sure you're protected and making sure you're safe. So 3 copies of your files. So it's called 3-2-1 backup is their setup here. 3 copies of your files. You say, wait a minute, that's too many copies of my files. How do I keep track of anything? It's actually not that hard. So bear with me for a little bit while we walk through this. We have one primary copy. That's the one that you work on and that you actively change. And then we have 2 backup copies. And just bear with me for where those are for right now. 2 backup copies. So 1 primary, 2 backups. 2 different mediums. So we store those 3 files on 2 different mediums. It could be on an external hard drive. Could be on an internal hard drive. Could be in the cloud somewhere. Could be on a flash drive. Could be in a variety of places. In the old days, you could like burn it to a disk, but nobody does that anymore. There's not even disk drives on any computers. So you don't really do that anymore. The thing about, and the reason that this is important, is because any media can fail. It's getting less likely, right? But how does a flash drive fail? You run over it with a car. You put it in the wash, right? That fails. That fails differently than, say, a burned CD, right? You could put a burned CD in the washing machine and it would be fine. So it's protected in a different way. If the burned CD was exposed to fire, it would melt and you'd lose your stuff. Well, guess what? Pretty much everything exposed to fire dies. So burned CD is a bad example, but a flash drive or your hard drive, if you have a spinning hard drive, like the one I have plugged in here, one of those mini hard drives, has little disks that spin, they're subject to magnetism. You go through a strong magnetic field, it might demagnetize. Your flash drive isn't subject to that. You wouldn't lose anything. So you're protecting yourself by spreading the risk, if that makes sense. So we're putting things on different types of drives to help ensure that risk is spread out. And the last thing is that you want 1. So we had 3 copies of your files. 2 are backups. 1 is your primary working file. 2 is that we have 2 different mediums. And the third, the 1 principle, is that 1 is not with you. I call it off-site here because that's an easy way of determining with it. But it's 1 that you're not carrying with you wherever you are. So 3, 2, 1. So how do we achieve this? This has gotten so easy. In the old days, like 5 years ago, this actually took some effort to get 1 not with you. Now, you have OneDrive. It's built into the operating system. You can store files in a variety of places. You can store them in Dropbox. Heck, iCloud on your Apple products stores your whole documents folder in the cloud. I mean, there's so many options for where you store your stuff. It's not as much of a big deal as it used to be. But the idea is that 1 is away from you in the cloud somewhere else. And this is the big protection for your house burns down. What do you do? Okay? So, I like to call this my doom and gloom section. But I'm going to challenge you to think about a few scenarios. I'm going to tell you some stories to help you think through some scenarios. All of these stories that I'm going to tell you are true. So the first story I'm going to tell you is about my wife when she was a kid. She grew up in the Central Valley. She grew up in Yuba City. And she was away. She was actually in Europe in high school. Her mom took her to Europe. She was in Europe, and she got a phone call from her stepdad. And her stepdad said, the levee's going to break, and it's either going to break and flood Marysville, or it's going to flood and it's going to break and flood Yuba City. What do you want from your room? I have 30 minutes. So if I asked you the same question right now, if I said you have 30 minutes to get whatever's important to you out of your house, what would you take? Have you ever stopped and thought about that? It's even more pertinent now with all the fires that keep happening. You know, we have fire season now in November. What do you take? If the police officer, the sheriff comes to the door and says, I'm sorry, sir, you've got to leave right now. What do you grab? I challenge you, not because this is doom and gloom and I think it's going to happen to you. I hope it never happens to you. But I challenge you with that question because you need to be prepared. What do you have? What's protected? What's not protected? So my wife's answer, she was in high school. Number 1 thing she wanted, her yearbooks. Hey, you know, it is what it is. Number 2 thing was the rest of her photo albums. You know, and beyond that, it was a few minor things. But she had to come up with that answer, and she couldn't do it herself. She had to tell somebody, this is what I want. So the same thing applies here. Okay? What if you didn't have time and your house was going to burn down or whatever? What do you have stored on your computer that you would really be devastated to lose? So for me, maybe the pictures of the birth of my children, maybe my wedding photos. I wouldn't want to lose that stuff. So I need to make sure that those are in a place that they're safe and that they're protected, as opposed to waking up one morning and realizing it's all gone. So it's really important to think about this kind of stuff. And I don't mean to depress you about it, but it's something that if you haven't really thought about it, you might be really upset. Okay, so let's use another example close to home. This is probably about 9 years ago now. So I gave a talk similar to this, not quite the same, about back up your files. And same thing in the beginning of the semester. I told everybody to back up their files, and at that point everybody was like, yeah, whatever, it's too much work. So we come down, the semester goes on and whatever, and we get to 1 week before finals. And I have a girl come in to me, and she said, you know, Mr. Adams, can I just give you a hug? I'm like, that's a little weird. Like, you know, I mean, this was before Me Too and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I was like, okay, yeah, I guess. I mean, it's weird, you know. She's like, I just walked out to my car and the window was smashed and somebody grabbed my laptop out of the front seat of my car. She said, all my work was on my laptop. All my work was on the external hard drive that was in my bag. But I listened to your talk and I had a backup of everything because you told me I had to have a backup of everything. She said, I was about ready to present for 220, like I have to do that tomorrow, and I would have lost absolutely everything if I didn't have a backup. So it wasn't some creepy reason that she wanted to give me a hug. It was the fact that she listened and she protected herself. I didn't do anything. I just prodded you. It's like a little cattle prod, you know, like back up, you know, back up. So the point is that if you do that, you're protecting yourself. So the same things have happened to other people. Sorry, I lost the slides here. Same things have happened to other people. I already alluded to this. Where's the slides? With people snapping off their flash drives in the computer with your knee. Right? I tried to eliminate those problems. I told you all to get the little dongle so it wouldn't happen. I've had students do that. The worst thing that you can do is do that and go, oh man, I wish I backed up my stuff. It's so much easier to back up ahead of time. So just do it, and then you don't have to worry about it. So you're in this lab. What do? You can't store anything on the computer. Guess what? You can still do this 3-2-1 backup principle. It's pretty easy. You plug in your hard drive. You have one copy on that hard drive that's your working copy. We hook it up to OneDrive. It takes that working copy as soon as you save it, and it throws it up to the cloud. You just have a second copy that's in the cloud, and guess what? That second copy is also off-site. It's not with you anymore. So we've satisfied almost everything. We just don't have the third copy yet. So how do we deal with that third copy? You go home and you install OneDrive on your computer, and as soon as you save your file here, it goes to the cloud, and then it gets saved in your home computer. You now have 3 copies of your files. They're on 2 different mediums, and 1 is off-site. You just solved your problem. You're not going to lose your stuff. So one other story about losing things, and the reason that automation is important. So you have to automate these backups. If you say, you know what, when I get home, I'm going to plug in my flash drive, and I'm going to back up my stuff, it's not going to happen. Because somebody's going to say, hey, do you want to go out and have dinner? Sure, let's go have dinner. Right? Yeah, maybe. Some of you aren't old enough for this, so shut your ears. It's like earmuffs. Right? Maybe have a few drinks. It's a pretty good night. You're feeling pretty good. You come home. I'll back up in the morning. Actually, you probably wouldn't even remember that. You go to sleep. You wake up the next day. You work a little bit more. Something else happens. Somebody invites you to go to the Warriors game. You go to the Warriors game. You come back. I'll back up tomorrow. You see where this is going. You don't actually do it. So it has to happen in the background. So for me, I've had 2 times where my computers failed. The first time, I was sitting in my office. Wasn't over here. My office was over there. It was in December. Finals were done. I was sitting down. I was filling out the final grades for everybody. Submit the final grades. Computer goes black. What? I'm like, this was before this particular computer. I'm like, I don't get it. It won't boot up. Nothing. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Finally boots. No hard drive. What? So I'm like, oh, this is crap. I turn it over. I pull out the hard drive. Put it into an external drive. Plug it in. Hard drive's dead. Like dead. Like non-recoverable dead. It happened to be right after I submitted grades, so that was convenient. Did I lose everything on my hard drive? No, I did not, because it was actively backing up right as I said submit those grades. So I didn't lose anything in that. So it happens. But if you're backing your stuff up correctly and it's automatic, you're not going to run into the same problems. So there's built-in options. You can use Time Machine or you can use Windows Backup. That's fine. Those generally require some kind of external hard drive to be plugged in, or you need to be on your home network where the drive is. It's more and more off-site stuff. So you're going to do it through Dropbox or Google Drive or OneDrive, etc. These are a bunch of examples of syncing programs that help you do this saving. These are kind of antiquated because a lot of the stuff is done through these off-site backups now where you just don't think about it. Sometimes it costs a little bit. So if you have Apple's iCloud, for example, you have to pay for the 2 terabyte plan or whatever, so you have enough space, and it costs $5 or $10 a month, but you're really protected after you do that. So it's kind of an investment in yourself. It's not that expensive to do it, and I think it tends to be worth it. We're going to use OneDrive in this class. I used to use Dropbox. I have had terrible luck with Google Drive, and a lot of people say, can't I just use Google Drive? The problem with the lab computers is they just don't play nice with Google Drive. If you have your home computer and you can then install stuff and you have admin rights, it works. Here, they just don't work that well. Dropbox, you used to run a portable version of Dropbox, and it was okay. But OneDrive's built into these, and it lets you sync to your external drive. So it just works, and you guys all get 25 gigs for free. So that's what we're going to use. There are personal aftermarket solutions. You guys know that I run my own website here. I have 2 servers. One of my servers is in Dallas, and that's the one that does my backup system. It's kind of like OneDrive or Dropbox or whatever. It's just private. So it's called OwnCloud. And you can actually install it on a server and then have your own cloud that's not connected to any company. So if you're really worried about security and whatever, you can do it that way. But obviously you have to pay for your server and what have you. So this should be obvious. Your backups basically need to happen all the time. The one thing that I will say that's useful is if you think about doing a semester backup, sometimes that's really useful because you've created all this work over the course of the semester, and then you say, okay, here's this big chunk of work, let me put it somewhere safe. You put it on a flash drive, you put that flash drive somewhere, and you move on and use a new flash drive next semester. It just gives you a nice place that, hey, here's all the stuff I worked on in that semester. So sometimes I do an extra backup that way as well. So the other thing that I will share with you, and this is where you guys think I'm really nuts, okay? But there are things that are really important to me. I already alluded to those, the birth photos of my kids. Some of those photos are just really invaluable. And so I go this weird extra step, and that is that I put them on a little external hard drive, and I go and I take it to my bank, and I put it in my safety deposit box. Now, this is a big pain in the butt, for lack of a better term, because I have to go get the drive, I have to go sync the new photos on it from this year and go stick it in. So I could theoretically lose about a year's worth of photos, because I don't do it more frequently than a year. And it's easy to get behind and not do it. Remember that automation thing? This is not automated. But I know if my house burns down and everything else in the world fails, I still have that copy that's sitting in my safety deposit box. Unfortunately, the bank robbers that come in to try to rob my safety deposit box are going to be thoroughly disappointed, because they're going to open it up and they're like, what is this? Anyway, so it's ridiculous, but it is a way of ensuring that for sure I will make sure that I have those things that are most important to me. So let's shift over and let's talk a little bit about calendars. Now my hope is that most of you keep some kind of a calendar. What? I love it when my stuff disconnects itself. It's like, oh, come on. It lost the internet connection. Hey, hold on one second. Let me see if I can get it back. There we go. All right, so apologize for that. So calendars. Generally, people keep calendars for different major activities in their life. They might keep a work calendar, they might keep a personal calendar, they might keep a school calendar. And I think that's not a bad idea as a way of trying to keep organized. Whenever you can subscribe to a calendar, that's all the better. So if you have a favorite sports team and you want to know when their games are, if you can subscribe to their calendar, all the better. If the times of the games change, the times change in your calendar. That's a good thing. In this class, you can subscribe to the calendar for this class. If I change the dates or I change the assignments around or I change the due date, it'll show up on the calendar, automatically shows up on your calendar. So you don't have to input it manually, it just fixes itself. So this is a good thing when it's possible. The other thing is to make sure that the calendars are actually on the devices that you use. So if you use an iPad and you use a phone and you use your computer, make sure that whatever calendar system you're using can be on all those devices. Because there's times where you don't have access to your computer, but you have access to your phone. You still want to be able to see what that calendar is. So you have a variety of choices. There's a bunch of free options out there. Most of them come with whatever email account you have. Google, Yahoo, Outlook all provide those. If you're in the Mac ecosystem, you can use iCloud. That's another option for you as well. So your calendar looks something like this. This is an example. This is a little bit old, September 2018. But here's the calendar. It's saying there we are, lecture 102. This is where it is. It's at Diablo Valley College. It starts at 7:55 a.m. Then at 8:55 we go to lab 102, and it's establishing your online identity. So I set those things up, and they automatically show up in your calendar. You can look at it in a monthly setup. And this is just Outlook's version. It's essentially, you've seen a calendar. You've probably seen plenty of calendars. You know what they look like, right? And Yahoo's version. So email. So how about this for some statistics? Generally people, the average person has at least 3 email accounts. One that you've given out to your friends and family, one that's given to you by your work or school, and one other account. Everybody has that other account, right? It's the account that you don't use when you don't really want somebody spamming you, right? It's that other one that just floats out there. The number of emails sent by humanity, this is in 2018, so it's probably more than this now. Each day, is 235.6 billion emails. It's a lot of emails. It's 124.5 business emails and 111.1 consumer emails in broad terms. The average person sends and receives 121 emails per day. How many people feel like they're average? How many people feel below average? Nice, good for you. How many people feel like they're above average? Definitely me. Email ad spending as of 2019 is 350 million. I don't know if that's in the US or not. I'm guessing it's just the US. It's a lot of money. 93% of business-to-business marketers use email marketing to proliferate their content. 73% of millennials use emails for business. 99% of consumers check their personal emails at least once every day. 28% of all emails are opened on iPhones. I thought that was an interesting one. At least 5 out of 10 emails were spam. That's probably true. So how do we simplify and how do we declutter all this email that's coming in? If you get 121 emails a day, how do we organize that a little bit better? Strip your email inboxes down to as few accounts as possible. That's one good way of doing it. So this is if you have lots of email accounts. If you're in that boat where you basically have your personal email and you just have your school email and you have that other one, it doesn't matter so much. But sometimes you end up with a bunch of emails. And we'll talk a little bit about what email address looks like. I mean, you don't want to be sexyhotdaddy123@gmail.com and send that out to your potential workplace. It's probably not the right choice. So you probably want something a little bit more, personal. A little bit something, nicer, forward-facing. My cousin, I pick on a lot of people today, right? So my cousin, he had an email when he was in high school. It was his name, The King. Yeah, he got to college and he's like, nah, I don't really want to send that out. And so he got a new Gmail account that was his name and his last name at gmail.com. So you think about that, and then you think about how you want to present yourself, and maybe you start trying to consolidate a little bit. And by consolidating, I say, think about what's your email. This is the one I want to use, and I want all of my other accounts to filter down into that one account. And I want to get people to use that new account. So what you do is you forward emails from those old accounts into the one account that you want to use. You use that, and pretty soon everybody that you send emails to has updated their contacts and then sends your emails to the new one. So you're not losing anything. You don't have to go check that old account. You're just kind of forwarding all your old stuff into that nice, clean email account. Enable your spam filters and mark emails as spam frequently. Okay, so how about this one? Has anybody ever unsubscribed and then realized that they got more emails after unsubscribing? You click the unsubscribe button, you start getting more emails. So unsubscribing is this weird, finicky thing because spammers realize that if they put an unsubscribe button at the bottom, it's a way of confirming, hey, I've got a valid email address if somebody clicks on it. So I would only use unsubscribe if it's like a known company, like Pottery Barn. Unsubscribe. Okay, that's legit. But if it's something weird or something spammy to begin with that you probably didn't sign up for, don't unsubscribe it. Train your email to just send it into the spam folder so you don't ever see it. And that's a lot of what dealing with spam is. It's training your spam folders to make sure that it just collects that stuff automatically. If you've ever actually looked in if you have a Gmail account, if you ever actually looked in your spam folder, you'd be surprised how much stuff is in there because of Gmail's automatic filters. So just be aware that that's a really good thing to do. If you're interested in something that's kind of funny, there's a TED Talk, maybe you guys have seen this, about a guy who replies to spammers. Oh, it's fantastic. It's about 10 minutes. Totally worth your time. So there's a link to it on the course website you can look at. He's really funny. And he talks about trying to scam the scammers and this conversation that he had back and forth via email. I don't have enough time to do it, but it's pretty funny. So if you want a humorous 10 minutes, go ahead and watch that. So here we are. This is in Gmail. If you want to enable forwarding, it's pretty easy. You go into your settings. You click on the forwarding, pop in IMAP settings, and then under forwarding, you say forward incoming mail to this account. You have to verify that it's your account so you don't start spamming somebody else. But essentially, you could say, take all the email that comes into this account, forward it into that account. So this is a great thing to do if you don't actively check your Insight school email. Take that Insight school email. I think I have the next one, I think, is Outlook. Yeah, this is the Outlook one. Take that school email, and forward it into the account that you automatically check. Because then you won't miss something. If I send you an email saying I have the flu and we don't have class, you don't show up here saying, oh man, I should have checked the Insight email. Right? Get it into some account that you check. Now maybe you check that Insight email on a regular basis, in which case it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Just be aware that you can do this as a way of kind of consolidating and simplifying. The other thing that you can use is you can use an email client that helps you get through your email really fast. Most of the tablets and phones are starting to get pretty good at building this into their email clients. If you have gestures, like you can quickly archive by swiping one direction, delay by swiping the other direction, that can help you get through email. If you're in the iOS, Android ecosystem, there's an app called Spark by a company called Readle. I think it's a really good one. It's one that I use. And it helps you because you can snooze emails. You can say, take this one that's important, but remind me about it in 2 days when I can actually deal with it. And it'll show back up in your inbox, and you don't see it in the interim. So it's kind of a nice little feature. It looks like this, and it's across all those devices except for Windows. So that's where you're a little bit stuck in their world. Anybody heard of Google Voice before? Another service offered by Google. You can get your own phone number through Google Voice. If you don't want to give out your actual cell phone number to people, and you just want a phone number that they can text you on. Does this sound familiar to anybody? So the phone number I gave you last class is actually a Google Voice number. It's not my real cell phone, right? But it comes in just the same. I have the Google Voice app on my phone. You guys text me, it shows up there. And it saves me from here's my real phone number. So anyway, you can sign up for it. It's free. You can pick your own phone number, which is kind of fun. And you can use that. It does some other stuff, like if somebody leaves you a voicemail, it'll transcribe it into a text message and send it to you, so you can just reply by that. Sometimes that's nice. You can also set up greetings for different people, so it can recognize who's calling and give you a certain voicemail message. This thing is killing me. It keeps disconnecting. I must have a dead spot when I walk over here. We'll just skip it for now. It's fine. So let's talk a little bit about how the internet works. I know this is kind of just keeps going on and on and on, right? But we've got a lot of stuff to cover. So some of you are aware of how the internet works. Some of you are not aware of how the internet works. I like to give you just kind of a broad overview of what's going on, because we do all this stuff online and you don't necessarily stop and think about it. We have something called the DNS system, the domain name system, that transcribes the physical address of the computer that hosts the website to something that you can remember. If you needed to go to apple.com and you needed to remember that you had to go to 17.172.224.47, it would be really hard versus saying apple.com. Perfect. So this is a kind of like a reverse phone book. So you type in apple.com, it says, hey, this is where the server is. Route my content to there. These servers, I talk about servers, are essentially computers that are stuck in data centers in the middle of nowhere, or maybe not, that are in special rooms that have redundant backups and power supplies when the grid goes down, etc., to try to serve up this internet content. We get to all that internet content using a web browser. You have a lot of flexibility when it comes to web browsers. They're all decent in this day and age. Safari is the one that's built into the Mac operating system. Microsoft Edge or Internet Explorer, depending, are the ones that are built into Windows. There was a lot of controversy over Internet Explorer about 10 years ago because Microsoft basically didn't update it and didn't do anything with it, and there was a lot of security vulnerabilities. They've essentially fixed all of that, so it's not a big deal anymore. Firefox is another independent one that you can install anywhere. Google Chrome is very common. Most of you probably browse in Chrome anyway. Chrome is considered to be the fastest one, though everything's fast, so it kind of doesn't matter anymore. In the old days, it did matter, like 10 years ago. And then there's this other one called Opera that nobody uses, but it's there. So you want to think about, when you're picking a web browser, what kinds of things can you add on to make your browsing experience a little bit better? These might be ad blockers that are built in. They might be, little shopping widgets that help you get discount codes and whatever. Most of that stuff is available across all the various browsers. So if you use Ebates, they have a plugin for every different browser that you use. So it's something that's available to you should you want to. How fast is the browser? I said it basically doesn't matter anymore. They used to have all these speed tests between browsers about how fast they could load pages and whatever. And now all of them are so fast you can't tell the difference. So it doesn't really matter. Cross-site tracking is another big one. So this is one that you've probably experienced. You go and you say, oh, I'm really interested in a new blender. And you go into Google and you type in Vitamix, all right? And then the next thing you know, you're browsing on some other site, and all of a sudden all the ads that you see from then on are blenders. So this is something called cross-site tracking that is available to advertisers on a lot of websites. And there's new privacy laws that are making it more restrictive. But essentially what they do is somebody sets a little cookie in your browser and says, oh, this person's interested in blenders. And then the next website, different website, looks and says, oh, this person's interested for blenders. Great, I'm going to show all the ads for blenders. And in a way, it's kind of cool, because if you're looking for a blender, you're going to see a bunch of blenders. But when you looked for a blender and then you decided you didn't want a blender and then all you see are blenders, it's really annoying. So there is one thing that you can do to help. It's not perfect, because, for example, the other thing that happens is if you ever look for anything on Amazon, the next time you go anywhere on Amazon, it's all that stuff, always. But that's within Amazon, so you can't help yourself because you're within the same website. They're going to do it anyway. But this is a cross-site. So in your web browser, this is in Chrome, you can go into your settings and you can look for this thing called Send Do Not Track Request with your browsing traffic. It's usually turned off, but you can turn it on. And this will help that not happen. So it's available in Chrome. It's available in pretty much all of them. Here it is in Safari. Under the privacy settings, you can check that box for prevent cross-site tracking, and that will help that do a little bit better. So it's worth turning them on, especially on your home computer. There's no reason not to do that, unless you like seeing ads for blenders. I mean, it's up to you. So Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is everywhere. We use it all the time, but we don't really think about what the security vulnerabilities of Wi-Fi might be. And a lot of this is user problems. So let's say that you connect to the DVC Wi-Fi network. Well, it's an unsecure Wi-Fi network. Gives you open access to the internet. That's great. That's a good thing. But if you're doing things that are stupid, like sharing files on your computer or leaving your computer wide open, not protected, people can do stuff to your computer just by being on the same network as you. This is particularly common in things like schools, hotels, right? Where there's plenty of people around and somebody can be sitting there on a laptop trying to get into somebody else's computer. You'd be surprised. So I'm not on the student network, I'm on the faculty network because it's slightly different than you guys. You'd be surprised how many faculty people have computers with these things open. Like, I'm tempted to write little Word documents and stick them on their desktop saying, hey, by the way, your computer's wide open, just so you know. So be aware that this kind of stuff happens. So lock yourself down, make sure you're not sharing files unnecessarily, right? Make sure that everything's password protected and encrypted. All of that's important. If you're on, let's say I'm here at DVC and I go to my bank, and you see that little lock icon appear in your browser, nobody's going to see anything because it's actually encrypted connection back and forth to your bank, so you're not worried about that kind of thing. So a lot of sites have gone that direction. You see HTTPS, that's a secure protocol to a website. Generally speaking, you're safe. So they're encrypting the traffic from one direction to another. So next thing, secure your own network. So let's say that I was a bad person. I'm not a bad person, thankfully, but let's say I was a bad person and I wanted to do some really illegal stuff online. Like I really wanted that new copy of that movie and I wanted to pirate it and download it. Okay, so let's say I did that. And I was living in an apartment building. Would I do it on my own network or would I do it on your wide open Wi-Fi network? Probably pick your wide open Wi-Fi network, not use my own. So what can you do about that? Put a password on your network. Make sure that it's not open. Make sure that it's actually secure. That's important. 128-bit or higher is your encryption level. That's an important thing to make sure as well. Don't leave your default like Netgear or Linksys or whatever, because those passwords are known. Like everybody knows that Linksys is like admin and then the password is admin or whatever, so you can log in, change the passwords. The Comcast and AT&T and the big internet service providers are getting better about doing not generic passwords anymore. You flip your router over and it has the special password on it. So things are getting better than they used to be. So a virtual private network. So this is another thing that most people are unaware of that I actually think has great value to you guys, especially if you travel outside of the country. What it is it allows you to make an encrypted connection from your computer to somewhere else. So it's secure and encrypted, and then you can browse from the internet from wherever that location is once you've made that secure encrypted connection. So sometimes these are touted as anonymous browsing, which is kind of correct. The idea there is that you really don't want Walmart tracking you or whatever. You're worried that the NSA is spying on your traffic and watching that you're, collecting, guns or something. I don't know what you're doing, right? So you don't want somebody doing that. So you connect to one of these virtual private networks. Once you're going out to the internet from their server, the only thing the NSA, theoretically, could see is the traffic that comes back to that server. It couldn't see where it goes from that server. So it's a way of pseudo-protecting your privacy there. I don't believe that it's perfect at protecting your privacy. I think if the NSA really wanted to find out who you were, they'd find out who you are. So I don't think it's that great for privacy. However, I'll tell you a use case that I think is a really good reason why this stuff happens. So my father-in-law, I told you I picked on everybody today. That's the way today goes. So my father-in-law spends more than half the year either down in Costa Rica or down in Ecuador. And he chooses to run around with the native tribes and trade blow dart guns and I don't know, whatever. He's awesome, but it's bizarre. That's his pastime. He likes to do that sort of thing. Anyway, he has an email account through his AT&T internet here, and he was down there and he's like, I can never get any of my emails, so I'm gone for like 3 months and I don't ever get any email. So I said, hey, you should sign up for this kind of a service. And so what he does is when he's down there, he connects to one of these services, and he makes an encrypted connection back to California, and then he can check his email like normal. So it's a way of shifting your geographic location. So AT&T actually thinks he's in Southern California or wherever he's connected, rather than down in Ecuador, blocking content. So it's a way of actually accessing that. If you wanted to watch BBC programming in the UK, for example, you could actually shift your location to be in London if you wanted to. So it's a way of being able to geographically shift. And I think that's a really great way. So let me go ahead and show you how this stuff works, just so you have an idea. So bear with me for a second here. So I'm going to pull up my browser. And again, I'm working on a Mac here, but it's the same whether you're on Windows or not. And I went to a couple different websites here. This one's called IP Leak, and it's just telling you information about your browsing. And I already looked this up right now. And so when I did it, it says, hey, my access to the internet is on 192.235.5.128. And so if I scroll down here a little bit more, it's going to give me some details about it. Like, for example, I'm in Pleasant Hill, California. So it knows exactly where I am. Furthermore, I can come down here and it can say, oh, you're on a Mac. You're running the Intel operating system. Your screen resolution is this. Like, this is all information that's just available because I browsed to a website. Interesting, right? So what if I wanted to geographically shift to my location, like my father-in-law does? So I can do that by connecting to one of these. So I'm going to pick New Zealand as an example. And essentially all I have to do is connect to New Zealand. I'll make a secure connection to New Zealand. There I am. And now I'll refresh this page. There we go. And my IP address changed. I'm now in New Zealand. And this is actually kind of entertaining because you can do it where you could switch to, I could be in Italy, and if I brought up the Google homepage, it would be Google Italia instead. So it's interesting, right? And so I just shifted my geographic location. All of my web traffic now originates from Auckland, New Zealand, as opposed to the United States. So this may or may not be something that fits into how you operate, but it may be something that really helps you if you're trying to access your email from outside. These are the kinds of things, and the reason I bring them up in a lecture format today is because nobody ever talks about this stuff. And so why shouldn't you be aware that these kinds of services exist? They're not particularly expensive. They're like $40 a year if you want this kind of a service. Anyway, enough of that. All right, passwords. I told you I was going to talk about passwords. This one's actually really important. So this is actually a little bit old, but the hacking community in general, I'm picking on Russian hackers here, but there's a lot of hackers out there. They now have 1.2 billion passwords. They probably have like 3 billion passwords now. You hear about this stuff like, oh, Target had a breach of security and they stole a bunch of passwords and whatever. And you're like, great, but it wasn't me. I don't have a Target account. The problem here is that what are the chances that one of those 1.2 billion passwords is one of the passwords that you used. It might be from somebody else. But if you pick something that's a generic type password, somebody else might have picked of it, right? Well, the problem with this is that if somebody is trying to hack an account, are they going to start with A-B, A-C? No, they're going to pick all the list of the ones that are known and try those first, because it's more likely to be one of those than a random string of characters. So if the more and more of these things happen, the more and more likely it is that your passwords are compromised, even if you weren't part of one of these breaches. The average internet user has 27 accounts and only 6.5 passwords. Sometimes it's less. How many people fall into that category? Yeah, a couple of you. At least you're honest. Thanks for being honest. I appreciate it. The rest of you, you're all lying, right? Most normal passwords can be cracked in about 90 seconds. Not too hard. No, this doesn't work anymore. 1 in 10 passwords, here's the answer to your question. 1 in 10 passwords is a name and a year. So think about your passwords. I'm not going to ask anybody to raise their hands on this stuff, right? 2 in 1,000 passwords is the word password. Oh, come on. This one's pretty fun. Love is the most common verb in a password. It's 12 times more likely to be seen than the word hate. Sorry, I'm going long today, so probably another half hour or so, if that's okay. All right, thanks. Most popular adjectives in a password? Hot, pink, and sexy. Yeah, baby. Statistically, but see, these are the things that hackers are looking for. If they're trying to get into your account, they know these statistics. They know it's more likely that one of those is going to be in your passwords. So the faster the computers, the faster the passwords can be cracked. So here's an example. This is running a bunch of these graphics processors. It can try 8.2 billion password combinations each second as it's going through, trying to crack passwords. The more passwords that are leaked or discovered, the easier it is, because they start with that list first before they go to the random character strings. That's an example of one of the password cracking computers. Not sexy looking, but powerful, right? So the tricks don't work anymore. This is what people used to do to try to make their passwords fancy. Mustache forward and backwards. That would destroy me because I can't spell mustache to begin with, right? But they do forward and backward words. Okay, well, that's been done. Substitutions, these are great, right? Oh, instead of a 3, we're going to put an E, or an E instead of a 3, or all that stuff. Put the exclamations at the end. You guys have done this, right? Oh, your password's not secure enough. You need another character. What do? You put an exclamation at the end. Everybody does that. So be aware that those kinds of things are done. They're known strategies. Hackers know that those are strategies, so they don't really work. So this is the OMG moment. What should you do? Okay, so number 1, you shouldn't ever use the same password twice. So if you have 27 internet accounts, you should have 27 passwords. If you have 100 internet accounts, you should have 100 different passwords. So never the same password. You should use a password that contains numbers, letters, symbols, and anything else you can think of to be in there. The problem here that drives me bonkers is when websites say, I'm sorry, that's not an allowed character. It's like, oh, come on. In this day and age, you should let me use any character I want. Make the password random. The more random it is, the more secure it is. So if you have a 24-character random string, that's a good password. Is it totally annoying? Yeah, it is. So how do you deal with that? How can you keep track of it? You can't remember 100 different 24 random character string passwords. So you need a password manager. And these are starting to be built into a lot of web browsers. If you run on a particular operating system, like the Apple operating system, for example, you can use their built-in, what's it called? Key something. Keychain, thank you. Obviously, I don't use it. You can use their built-in keychain, and they'll keep track of your passwords for you. Sometimes they even suggest passwords. You can also use one of these aftermarket passwords. And I need to update this one. The 1Password is now a subscription model. It's like $3 a month. And so you can use one of these password managers to do it for you, which is actually the ideal scenario. So what does a good password manager do? A good password manager will encrypt your passwords so that somebody can't see them on your computer. It'll protect them. It'll integrate with your operating system and your browsers. And this is why I don't like the keychain one that's on Apple, because I use other equipment that's not Apple specific. And so if, for example, even on my Apple computer, if I go to use Chrome because I want to use Chrome instead of Safari, suddenly the keychain doesn't work. So that's why I happen to use 1Password. That's the one that I use. But you can use any one of them. So you want it to integrate with your operating system and your browsers and all of your devices, phone, iPad, etc. Because if it's not on your device, it gets really annoying. Okay, and I'll show you that example in just a second. You want it to be able to generate complex, completely random passwords for you. These are those 24 random character password strings. You want to create a separate password for every online account that you have, so you never use the same password twice. You should have a desktop version and a mobile version, so you can use it both, and it should sync so that it works across both of them. So in my world, it's actually pretty seamless. I use 1Password. It's really easy on my phone because it does the face thing. So all I have to do is be looking at the website and it fills in my stuff for me. It's great. When you do the fingerprint one, it's a little more annoying because my iPad doesn't have the facial recognition, so I have to do the fingerprint or type in my thing. Generally, they're protected by some kind of a master code. So to get into it, like on my desktop, I don't have any fancy face recognition or whatever. So I have to type in a 1Password, the first one. It's like the master password. And so I actually took the time to remember a 24-character random string. And you think like, oh my God, I'd never be able to remember that. It doesn't take that long. You type it enough times, you're going to remember it. It takes a little bit of work initially, and then pretty soon you know, oh, that's my thing. And so it's completely random, and that's good. I feel secure in that. The other thing that's really annoying is it works great across all my devices, but I come into the lab and I have to log into OneDrive and the school computer and whatever. So my school password is actually 27 random characters, because they've made me change it a few times, so I keep adding characters to the end. And I can actually type that and remember that. And it's completely random with symbols and everything else because I've typed it so many hundred times. Every time I walk in here, I type it. So you can get used to it. Now, if I was on the school computer and I needed to log into my Gmail account, I'd have to go look in my phone, what's this random string of passwords, and then copy it and whatever. So it's really annoying when you get out of your particular ecosystem. But it might be worth it, because then you know you're nice and secure. I would certainly do it for my bank accounts. So the other thing that's very common now is something called two-factor authentication. And you've probably experienced this before at your bank, where they say, hey, we need to send you a text message to make sure you're you, and then you put in that extra code. This is becoming really common. It's an extra step. It's kind of annoying, but if somebody was trying to get into your stuff, they would have to have your phone and all your passwords. So it's just one extra step. So it makes it a little bit more secure. So identity theft. Anybody had their identity stolen? 1, 2. Really annoying. So 9 million Americans have their identity stolen every year. 15 billion was stolen from 13 million consumers in 2015, and it can happen to you. So here I am. I talk about all this security stuff, right? Oh, passwords are really important. You know, back up your files, all that, whatever. No, I'm not going to have my identity stolen. Sure enough, I get a phone call. Yeah, hi. Yeah, it happened to be my bank, so I was totally confused. They're like, we want to verify this new credit card that you applied for. I'm like, didn't apply for a new credit card. And then I started to get really sketched out because I was like, okay, well, this is like a random number saying they're my bank. I don't really know that they're my bank. So I'm like, I'm just going to call you back. So I hung up and I call my bank, call them back and get through all the prompts and whatever. And they're like, yeah, you did. You applied for this new credit card. I'm like, no, I didn't. And they say, okay, well, hold on a second. Let me transfer you to the fraud department. So I transfer her to the fraud department. And she starts looking into it, whichever. She's like, oh, so did you apply for a Sears card? Like, nope, didn't apply for that. Did you apply for a $25,000 personal loan from Discover? Nope, didn't do that. So then you start digging in. Turns out I bought 8 cell phones in LA. I have a couple Comcast accounts in Houston, Texas. The best part about the LA one, so all of this, anyway, the long story short, I filed police reports and all this and all that annoying stuff. It took tons of time to deal with all the paperwork. None of it I was liable for. So it turns out the people that did the cell phones in LA, it was T-Mobile accounts. Number one, they bought 8 cell phones. Number two, they bought protection plans on all 8 cell phones. And number three, when the sheriff went to T-Mobile, they said, oh yeah, they showed ID. So they had a driver's license with my information on it. It's like, what? So it's crazy. Anyway, so all this stuff, it can happen to you. You know how they did it? I'm like, oh, my internet stuff is so secure. How did they do it? Stole it right out of my mailbox. So it's so easy to get focused on being secure online and forgetting about the physical world too. So people were just skimming mail out of my mailbox, and I think they've been doing it for a while. So guess what? The next day, there was a locking mailbox right there. So be aware. Monitor your bank statements closely. If you've never gone to Credit Karma before, it's a website that tells you what your credit score is. But it also will show you hard inquiries on your credit history. And some of you, it doesn't matter because you're so young, you're not there yet. But as you get older in life, you buy a house and whatever, there's these impacts on your credit. Look at it, and that's where you can discover, like, oh, I have accounts open in my name in Houston, Texas. Didn't know that. So you can look at where these hard inquiries are coming from and try to figure it out and get to the bottom of it. So if you've never done that, it's worth taking a look. So branding yourself, and I'm going to wrap this up rather quickly. Essentially, when you're working online, you want to start thinking about who you are and who you're presenting forward-facing. So, for example, why don't you guys all wake up your computers? I know they're asleep just like you, but wake up your computers, go to Google, and type in your first and last name. This is the Google vanity search.
Well, I also do. So if I have a middle name, because my name is so common, they said it's 10 million.
Yeah. So you can try it. You can try it. You'll get where I'm going with this in just a second. So once you get to Google and you type in your name, how many people actually see themselves?
Oh, it's Facebook in the first search.
Okay, a few of you. That's good. That's a good sign. So the thing here is that if you're not actively controlling who you are online, Google will do it for you. If you look for me, it turns out I'm dead. I died in some kind of a suntan accident. Really? That's the last I heard. So this is, and then you can get more specific. Like if you look at Grant Adams' architecture, then you're going to find me, the actual me. But this is something, I'm not doing this to make it silly, like, oh, you should Google yourself and be vanity search yourself. But it is something that's important because guess what? When you go to apply for a job, what's the first thing your employer is going to do?
I'm a suspicious person and hit and run in LA.
Oh, man. God, you got to be more careful driving. So the point is that when your future employer Googles you, are they going to find you? Are they going to find somebody else who they think is you that's done some bad things, like your hit and runs, and say, you know what? I don't want to hire that person. Right. So you need to take control of who you are and what you do. And so one of the ways of doing that is controlling your name, your username at a variety of your online entities. The other thing could be establishing your own website or your own personal landing page where you control all the stuff. I used to do a personal landing page, but the companies that did it for free have all gone out of business, and I won't make you do things for money. So I'm going to skip through a few of these guys because they just don't matter right now. This is a personal landing page. The idea here is that it's a one-page website, and you could do this on your own if you're interested in web design. You could do it pretty easily. I have one that should be active. I think it's grantadams.net. And the idea is that all the stuff related to you is on that one page. And it lets Google search for that one page. And it lets you cross-link to that page. And it's a way of branding, hey, this is me. This is the stuff that I own. This is the stuff that I do. And so when somebody wants to hire me, you can refer them to that. And they can see all this stuff that brands you as you. And in the world of the internet, it matters how you control what is seen about there. Okay. So the one other thing that I'll say in here, we're wrapping up real quick, I promise. The other thing that I'll say is you guys, you have to be real careful about what you post online. And it used to be a big deal because everybody was on Facebook. Now none of you guys are on Facebook. I know that's like old. It's like the boomer generation is on Facebook. And you know, my generation's on Instagram, so I worry about what my wife posts. You guys are all on like Snapchat or TikTok or whatever it is that you're on now. But the point is that when you post silly pictures that are fun for your friends and whatever, if they live on, and if they somehow get associated with you, and if they somehow show up when somebody's doing background search and background checks on you, that could be problematic. I am so grateful that when I was in college as an undergrad, we didn't have digital cameras. So none of those pictures of me in less than inviting circumstances are available for any of you to see. However, you guys are growing up in an age where that stuff is so prevalent and so available, you have to be careful of that. And you have to understand what it is you post online, and is that appropriate down the road as you become a professional? And it's something that people are going to really be dealing with long term. So if you have your own domain name, you can do things like specifically branding your email. So I have grant@digitaltoolsforarchitects.com. That's a pretty professional facing email. For my company, I have grant@acoproperties.com. ACO Properties. That's my company. So I can brand myself that way. If you don't want to invest in having your own website and your own domain name and do this kind of thing, you could still have grant.adams@gmail.com. That's not my email, so don't start spamming it. It's somebody else's. But you could do something like that that helps to brand who you are and helps to put a professional face forward. And that's what a lot of this is about. So we'll skip through some of this stuff. Today we're going to work a little bit on LinkedIn. I'm not big on pushing social networks. However, I've found that LinkedIn is just kind of expected in this day and age. You're expected to have a LinkedIn profile. When you go to look for a job, they're going to ask you for it. It's a way of thinking through your resume and thinking through what experience you have when it comes to working. So we're going to spend a little bit of time working on that today. It's the alternative to be, if you really don't want to have a LinkedIn profile, if you want to just work on a real resume, like old-fashioned in Word, I'm okay with that as well. But I want you guys to think through that and to work on it. So today is, in terms of lab, we're kind of focusing on our career, our professional side, thinking about emails, calendars, and that sort of thing. Thanks for bearing with me. I know today was long, but I hope you got something out of it. You got something a little bit different that you might not normally get in a college class. That was my goal. And we'll go from there. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to let you guys all work. You'll work on the variety of things that I talked about, one of which is the calendar sync. For the calendar sync, if you go to today's exercise, it will show you the feed, which is right here. I did not make it a clickable link so that you could come in and highlight it. Make sure you highlight just the link. Don't highlight the little sub bullet point. Don't highlight any space after it. This is what you'll need to actually subscribe to that calendar. The next thing that I want to talk to you about is backing up your files in OneDrive. Now I'm going to use the school computer as my example computer because I already have OneDrive installed on my Mac. But I think this is a good way of explaining how to install OneDrive such that it syncs to an external hard drive. The first thing, of course, that you need is to plug in your external hard drive, and we can go from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up OneDrive. It's available down in the lower right corner, down by the clock. There's a little cloud icon. It'll be gray with a slash through it initially. And you're going to click on that little gray icon with a slash through it, and it's going to say OneDrive isn't connected. And so we need to connect it. So we'll click on the Sign In button. And this is where you're going to enter your school email. It's your first letter plus your last name plus your last three of your student ID at insight.edu, 4cd.edu. Yeah. Mine's different because I'm faculty. So mine will show up slightly differently than yours. You will click on Sign In. And when you sign in, I don't know if yours show this or not. It might be because mine's a faculty account or not. If this comes up where you have to pick whether it's personal or work or school, pick work or school. Otherwise, it may not even come up for you. Now, when you get to the password, obviously you have to enter your password. Ah. That was my 27 random characters. Right. Yeah. Good luck. Good luck. So this is the important part. You want to stop right here when you get to this screen when it says your OneDrive folder is here. By default, it puts it on your user account on the computer. We don't want it there because if it's there and the computer restarts, you lose everything. So we don't want it there. We're going to change the location. So there's a little link here to change the location. We're going to click on that change location. Once I have my drive, I'm going to pick my drive. There it is. Now, inside of the drive, I don't pick any folders. I just pick the drive itself, and it will create this folder called OneDrive dash blah, 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 blah. So I'm just going to pick the drive itself and then say select folder. Because I already have a folder, it's going to say, do you want to do a new folder or use the folder? You're always going to pick use this folder because you just want it to sync the existing folder. And that'll...
The drive itself.
Right. The first time it won't ask you, do you want the a new folder or not. The second time it'll always say that. So it is actually my drive, and then it's the folder called OneDrive dash Contra Costa Community District. In mine case, it's employees. Yours probably says student. Right. And I'll go ahead and say next. And then it'll give me some like get to know your drive, yada 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 whatever. And when we get to the end here, open my drive. It should open a folder. The icon down here will turn to blue, and it'll start syncing files back and forth. So my file, I already have a bunch of files, so it takes a little while for everything to even out, usually half hour to an hour. But anything that I'm currently working on will definitely be backed up. All the stuff that I'm saving will end up needing to be inside of that folder though. So I can click on my OneDrive folder and that'll take me to it. So the little default link in Windows takes you to it. But it's also, if we look at my flash drive, there's the folder. This is the stuff that's backed up. So one of the things that I would encourage you to do is stuff that you can get easily, like your V-Ray rendering library and whatever stuff that you just download. Keep it outside of your OneDrive folder. You don't need to sync it because you can replace it if you were to lose it. But all the school stuff, all the classes, in my case, my lectures and my recordings and whatever, they all go in this folder and get backed up. And so this will continue syncing as you save your files. It will sync. When you go to be done for the day, this is the other tricky part. Because you're syncing, sometimes your computer will say, I don't want to shut down because I'm busy syncing. So you have to decide, has it finished syncing or not? You can always check on it by clicking the little cloud icon, and you'll be able to tell whether it's still syncing or not. Chances are it will be done. Like I said, mine's full, so it's got to resync everything. But in my case, I have 54 gigabytes that it has to resync on this. But I have a larger OneDrive account. Anyway, when it's all done, it'll say it's up to date. In which case, it's no problem. We can eject it. If you're still syncing, you might want to wait a little bit until it can finish syncing. At this point, you can either quit OneDrive and then eject the drive, or what I would just recommend, just turn off the computer. So I would just go into the menu. It makes it nice, clean for the next person that comes in. Just go into the menu, go to your power button, and say shut down. By the time it's done shutting down, you'll be safe to eject all the drives. There's nothing still syncing. You're all good. Now remember, your file is on your flash drive regardless of whether it finishes syncing or not, because you saved it on your drive. So it's there. The sync just gives you the second and third copies of your file. So if you panic, oh my God, it's late, I gotta go, and you end up just having to take your drive and run, you still have your file. It's just not backed up. The syncing is just the backup, not the saving. So it's important for you to know that.